Caroline Miller woke up with a violent gasp, the kind that makes you feel as if you have been pulled out of deep water against your will. Her heart pounded so hard she had to clutch the sheets just to steady herself. For a moment, she lay frozen in the dark bedroom, unable to understand why she was shaking so badly. Then the memory of the dream hit her in one sharp wave. Her father had been standing in the doorway of her room, not the frail man she remembered from his final months, but the strong version of him from years ago. He wore the warm brown sweater he always favored in early winter, and his eyes held the same steady seriousness that had guided her through childhood. His voice was calm, low, and unmistakably clear as he said, "Caroline, do not wear the dress Thomas gave you. Do you hear me? Do not wear that dress." She had tried to answer him in the dream, but her voice would not come. He repeated the warning twice more, each time firmer than the last, before his figure began to fade into the darkness. Just before he vanished, he looked at her with an expression she had only seen a handful of times in her life. It was the look he used when danger was close, the look that said he needed her to trust him without question. When Caroline finally forced herself to turn on the bedside lamp, her nightgown clung to her back, damp with cold sweat. She wiped her forehead and tried to steady her breath, but the unease stayed lodged in her chest. Why would her father warn her about a dress her husband had proudly brought home as a birthday surprise? Just a dream, she told herself, but the fear beneath her ribs refused to settle. And Caroline had no idea that this dream was not just a warning, it was the reason she was still alive. The morning light crept slowly through the curtains as Caroline stepped into the kitchen, still haunted by the dream. She tried to shake it off, brewing coffee and telling herself she was simply exhausted, but even the familiar smell did little to settle her nerves. She kept glancing toward the living room where the large gift box from Thomas sat neatly on the console table. 2 weeks earlier, he had come home beaming, carrying that very box with both hands as if it held something priceless. Caroline remembered how he set it down in front of her, his smile unusually wide, almost rehearsed. "Open it," he insisted, practically buzzing with excitement. Inside was a sapphire blue evening gown, the kind of dress she would admire on a mannequin but never picture herself wearing. Thomas had told her it was custom made by a seamstress named Janet Holland, someone highly recommended through one of his colleagues. He kept talking about how the color would flatter her skin, how the cut was elegant but modern, how she would look unforgettable at her 50th birthday dinner. Caroline had felt touched then, even emotional, because Thomas was rarely expressive about gifts, but there was something odd in the way he repeated the same thing over and over. "You have to wear this one, this dress. Nothing else will look right for the night. I want everyone to see how beautiful you are," he said, gripping her shoulders a little too tightly. At the time, she had laughed it off, brushing aside the tension she sensed in his voice. But now, after the dream, the memory of his insistence returned like a weight on her chest. She walked to the console table and rested her hand on the box. The satin ribbon was still tied perfectly. It looked harmless, thoughtful, loving, exactly the kind of gesture any woman might hope for from her husband. Yet as Caroline traced the edge of the lid with her fingertips, a chill ran down her spine. She could not explain why, but something inside her whispered that this dress was not a gift. It was a warning waiting to reveal itself. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang, pulling Caroline from her circling thoughts. When she opened the door, a polite woman with kind eyes and a neatly pinned bun smiled warmly. "Mrs. Miller, I am Janet Hollins. I brought your gown for the final adjustments." Caroline stepped aside to let her in. Janet carried the garment bag with both hands, treating the garment with the delicate care one might give a wedding dress. They walked to the bedroom, and Janet unzipped the bag, revealing the sapphire gown resting on a padded hanger. The fabric shimmered softly, even under the dim light, catching every movement like liquid glass. "Go ahead and slip it on," Janet encouraged. "I want to make sure every seam lies exactly where it should." Caroline changed behind the screen, letting the smooth material fall over her shoulders. The zipper glided up effortlessly. When she stepped out, Janet clasped her hands together. "Oh, it suits you perfectly. The color, the shape, everything." Caroline studied herself in the mirror. It was beautiful, undeniably. The fitted waist, the gentle flare of the skirt, the careful stitching around the sleeves, it made her look elegant in a way she hadn't felt in years. A part of her wanted to smile, to enjoy this moment like any woman trying on a dress meant for a milestone birthday. But something quiet tugged at her, a faint discomfort, a feeling that didn't match the reflection in the mirror. Janet moved around her, tugging here and smoothing there. "Your husband was very involved in the design," she said casually. "He wanted everything to be perfect for you. He even asked for the lining to be reinforced in a few spots so it would hold shape better." Caroline froze for a second, though she tried not to show it. Reinforced? She nodded politely as Janet finished her work, but the word kept bouncing around in her mind. When the seamstress left, the house fell silent again. Caroline stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at the dress now hanging neatly against the closet door. It looked flawless, yet the dream, the insistence, that single strange word whispered by the seamstress, all of it clung to her like shadows refusing to lift. Caroline waited until the sound of Janet's car faded completely down the street before she finally closed the front door. The house felt unusually quiet, as though it were holding its breath along with her. She walked back to the bedroom, drawn toward the gown, as if some invisible thread were pulling her forward. The gown hung perfectly still on the closet door, shimmering softly, too still. Caroline crossed her arms, trying to shake off the sense that something about it felt staged, almost theatrical. She told herself she was being irrational, that the dream had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. But when she reached out and let her fingers travel lightly along the smooth fabric, her stomach tightened instead of easing. Her father's warning echoed again, clear, firm, impossible to ignore. She lifted the gown from the hanger and laid it carefully on the bed. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. She ran her hands slowly along the seams. Everything appeared immaculate. Janet was clearly skilled. There was no reason to doubt her work. But when Caroline reached the lining near the waist, her fingertips brushed a spot that felt thicker than the rest, barely noticeable, the kind of details someone without a reason to check would never feel. Her pulse quickened. She pressed it again. Yes, something was there, something flat, thin, just beneath the inner layer. For several seconds, she simply stood there, unsure if she was imagining it. Should she leave it alone? Should she trust her own instincts over simple logic? She thought of Thomas's insistence. She thought of the dream. She thought of the strange way her father had looked at her, even if only in memory. Finally, she walked to the dresser and pulled out the small sewing scissors she used for mending buttons. Her hand trembled as she sat on the edge of the bed and turned the gown inside out. The lining was smooth, expensive silk. She hesitated, the scissors hovering in the air. What if she was wrong? What if she ruined the dress for nothing? But then she imagined wearing it. She pictured herself sitting at the restaurant, surrounded by friends, toasting to her 50th birthday, trusting her husband beside her. The scissors lowered. Caroline gently snipped a single stitch, then another. The thread pulled apart with barely any resistance. She widened the slit just a fraction of an inch. A fine white powder spilled out like sand slipping through a broken hourglass. Caroline jerked back, the dress sliding from her lap. The powder dusted the dark bedspread, a stark, ghostly contrast. Her breath hitched as she stared, unable to fully register what she was seeing. There was no scent, no texture she could identify, just a soft cloud of white settling into the fabric. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Something inside her whispered that whatever this was, it had no business being inside a dress. And deep down, beneath the panic rising in her throat, a truth formed with terrifying clarity. This was not an accident. Someone had put it there, and the only person who insisted she wear the dress was Thomas. For almost a full minute, Caroline could not move. The white powder sat on the bedspread like a quiet threat, harmless in appearance, yet overwhelmingly wrong. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls. She forced herself to stand, gripping the edge of the dresser just to steady her legs. She had one person she could call. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked her phone and tapped the name she needed.
Harper Lane, her closest friend since college, and now a toxicology technician at a medical lab. When Harper answered, her voice was upbeat, unaware of the storm on the other end of the line. "Caroline, everything okay? You sound strange." Caroline swallowed hard. "Harper, I need your help. I found something inside the dress Thomas gave me. I found powder, white powder, sewn into the lining." The silence on the line was instant and heavy. When Harper spoke again, her tone had changed completely, sharpened by training and instinct. "Listen to me carefully. Do not touch it again. Have you already touched it with your bare hands?" Caroline exhaled shakily. "Yes, I did not know what it was." "Then wash your hands immediately. Soap, warm water."
Scrubbed thoroughly. Do not brush the powder off the bed. Leave it as it is. Collect a tiny sample only if you have gloves. Bring it to me right now. Her voice was firm, urgent, almost commanding. Carolyn obeyed, hurrying to the bathroom. She scrubbed her hands until her skin turned pink. After drying them, she slipped on a pair of rubber cleaning gloves from under the sink. With a small plastic bag from her drawer, she returned to the bedroom and collected just enough powder for a test, barely breathing as she did. Within minutes, she was in her car, the bag tucked safely inside her purse. The drive felt endless, though she barely remembered any of it. When she reached the lab, Harper was already waiting by the side entrance, wearing her lab coat, expression tense. "Give it to me," Harper said, taking the sample. "Stay here. I will run a quick test." Carolyn waited in the hallway, leaning against the cold wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Every second stretched painfully. Her mind jumped between fear, disbelief, and a growing dread she could not push away. After what felt like an eternity, Harper opened the door. Her face was pale. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held fear. "Carolyn, it is not fabric, dust, or starch. It is poison, a transdermal compound. It activates through sweat and body heat." Carolyn stared at her frozen. Harper continued softly. "If you had worn that dress for a few hours, especially while moving or dancing, it could have stopped your heart, and no one would have questioned it." Carolyn felt her knees weaken, and Harper guided her into a chair before she collapsed. The sterile smell of the lab suddenly felt suffocating. Poison, not by accident, not by mishap. Someone had sewn it into the dress with intention. There was only one person who wanted her to wear it, only one person who insisted on it over and over. Thomas. Harper knelt beside her. "Carolyn, you cannot go home without telling someone. You need to report this immediately. I know a detective. His name is Raymond Cole. He handles cases like this with care. Let me call him." Carolyn could only nod. Harper stepped out into the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. Carolyn stared at the floor tiles, the pattern blurring as her thoughts spiraled. 20 years of marriage, vacations, holidays, movie nights, laughter, arguments, reconciliations, moments that felt real, honest. Were they all just pieces of a story she never fully understood? When Harper returned, she was accompanied by a tall man in a gray jacket, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "Mrs. Miller, I am Detective Raymond Cole. I heard what happened. Would you be willing to tell me everything from the beginning?" They moved into a small office, and Carolyn told her story, from the moment Thomas brought home the dress to the moment she found the powder. Cole listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting something in his notebook. When she finished, he closed the book gently. "Mrs. Miller, I will be honest with you. Your husband has been under investigation for some time. He has been involved in fraudulent real estate deals and owes a large amount of money to people who do not tolerate unpaid debts. He purchased a substantial life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. That raised suspicion, but we had no evidence of intent." Carolyn felt her stomach drop. Life insurance, fraud, debt, a dress that could kill. Cole leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "Now we have evidence, but we need your help to make the case airtight. Your birthday is tomorrow, yes?" She nodded. "Then here is what I propose. You attend the dinner as planned, but you do not wear that dress. My team will be there disguised as guests. If your husband is expecting something to happen, he will react when nothing does. That reaction is what we need to secure the arrest." Carolyn's breath shook, but she lifted her chin slightly. "You want me to face him?" "Not alone," Cole replied. "We will be right there." She took a long, steadying breath. "All right, I will do it."
Carolyn spent the rest of the evening in a haze, moving through her house like someone walking underwater. Every familiar object felt foreign now. The framed photos on the wall, the throw blanket on the couch, the scent of Thomas's cologne lingering faintly in the hallway. She kept wondering how many moments of her life he had already decided she would never live to see. By the next afternoon, she had barely slept, and her hands trembled as she applied makeup in front of the bathroom mirror. She chose a simple navy dress she had worn to a work event the previous year. Nothing flashy, nothing special, but it felt safe, and for the first time in hours, she could breathe. When Thomas came home to get ready, she was standing in the living room adjusting her earrings. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her, his smile stalled. His gaze swept from her face to the dress she wore, confusion shifting into something sharper. "You are not wearing the gown," he said, trying to mask the edge in his voice. Carolyn offered a small, controlled smile. "I felt like wearing this one instead." Thomas stepped closer too quickly. "Carolyn, I bought that dress for your birthday. We talked about this. You said you would wear it." His eyes flickered with something she could no longer pretend not to see. Panic, anger, calculation. "I changed my mind," she replied quietly. "It is my birthday, after all." A silent standoff hung between them, broken only when he forced a tight smile and muttered, "Fine, let us go." The drive to Magnolia Hall felt unnervingly quiet. Thomas kept glancing at her, his grip on the steering wheel tight enough to whiten his knuckles. Halfway there, he asked, "Did someone say something to you? You've been acting strange since yesterday." Carolyn kept her gaze on the passing trees. "I'm fine, Thomas, truly." He studied her for a moment, then turned back to the road, unconvinced. When they arrived, warm lights glowed from the restaurant windows. Inside, guests were already gathering near the long table decorated with flowers and candles. Laughter filled the room. Sophie ran up to hug her mother, and Carolyn held her tightly, grateful for the anchor. She scanned the room discreetly. At a small corner table, she spotted 2 men and 1 woman, looked unremarkable on purpose. They blended in seamlessly, but she recognized the quiet alertness in their posture. Detective Cole's team. They were here. Throughout the evening, Thomas hovered near her, attempting small talk but growing increasingly tense. He excused himself several times to take calls, returning each time more unsettled than before, and every so often he tried to pull her aside, only for Carolyn to smoothly redirect toward a guest or conversation. It was like watching a predator realize the prey was no longer where he expected it to be. Carolyn smiled, laughed when needed, accepted birthday wishes, all while her heart beat in a steady, controlled rhythm. She knew the moment was approaching. Everything hinged on staying calm. Tonight, the truth would finally step into the light. Dinner plates had just been cleared when the lights dimmed slightly, signaling it was time for the birthday cake. Guests clapped as the servers brought out a tall white cake decorated with blue flowers that matched the theme Sophie had planned. Carolyn stood behind it, smiling for photos as everyone sang. She blew out the candles with one silent wish for all of this to finally end. When the applause faded and guests began settling back into their seats, Carolyn felt a steady resolve rise in her chest. Her hands no longer shook, her voice no longer wavered. It was time. She walked toward the microphone near the small stage at the front of the room. Music softened to a gentle hum before fading completely. The chatter quieted. Faces turned toward her with warm expectation. Friends, coworkers, neighbors, people who believed tonight was nothing more than a celebration. But Thomas knew something else was coming. She heard his chair scrape loudly against the floor as he stood. "Carolyn, what are you doing?" he asked sharply. She looked at him, then at the crowd. "Please take your seats. I have something important to say." A hush settled over the room. She inhaled slowly. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Turning 50 is no small moment, and I'm grateful to celebrate it with people I love. But this year brought me something unexpected, a truth I never imagined I would face." Thomas lunged forward. "This is insane. You are lying." Before he could reach the stage, 3 plainclothes officers stood and intercepted him. Detective Cole stepped forward, pulling out his badge.
Thomas Miller, you are under arrest for attempted murder and multiple counts of fraud. Thomas jerked away, shouting, "They forced me. I had no choice. Caroline, please, you have to believe me." But Caroline felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, only the final snap of a bond that had already been breaking for years. "You chose this," she said quietly. The officers cuffed him as the room watched in stunned silence. Thomas's shouts faded as he was led out the door, leaving behind only the echo of what he had tried to do. And for the first time that night, Caroline truly felt free. The restaurant emptied slowly after the arrest, guests lingering only long enough to offer quiet words of support before slipping out into the cold night. Sophie stayed close to her mother, still shaken, still trying to understand how her father could have planned something so unthinkable. Caroline held her daughter's hand and kept her voice steady, even as her own emotions churned beneath the surface. By morning, Detective Cole arrived at her house to gather the final details. He explained that Thomas had confessed. The deaths were massive, owed to people who viewed violence as negotiation. The life insurance policy had become his desperate escape. Hearing the words out loud made Caroline feel both numb and strangely relieved. At least now the truth was no longer hiding in the shadows. In the weeks that followed, paperwork filled her days. Testimony, legal procedures, financial statements. The trial approached faster than she expected. When she finally sat in the courtroom watching Thomas in an orange jumpsuit, she felt an overwhelming emptiness. He looked smaller than she remembered, defeated. But when he turned to meet her eyes, she saw no partner, no companion of decades, only a man who had chosen his own survival over her life. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. After the verdict, Caroline returned home and stared at the living room where so much of her marriage had played out. Laughter, holidays, arguments, quiet mornings. All those memories suddenly felt tainted, like they belonged to someone else. That same night, she made a decision. She called a real estate agent and put the house on the market. 3 weeks later, she moved into a small cottage near the woods in Hendersonville. It had a wraparound porch, a garden out back, and room for silence without feeling lonely. With the money from selling the house, she paid off lingering expenses and allowed herself a fresh start. She applied for a part-time job at the town library. The work was simple, shelving books, helping visitors, organizing records, but it grounded her. The quiet aisles became a place where she could breathe without fear. Sophie visited often, bringing her grandson to play in the yard. Slowly, gently, life began to feel like something she could hold again without it slipping through her fingers. And each morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees and she stepped onto her porch with a mug of coffee, Caroline felt the faint but steady return of something she thought she had lost forever: peace. On a quiet Sunday morning, Caroline sat on her porch with a blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. The birds were just beginning to stir, singing their soft, uneven notes into the cool air. She watched the slow rise of the sun over the tree line and felt a calm she had never known in her old life. Not the forced calm of pretending everything was fine, but a deeper kind of steadiness that came from surviving what was meant to break her. She thought about the past year, about the dream that saved her, about the dress that could have ended everything, and about the moment she chose to walk toward the truth instead of hiding from it. It was strange, she realized, how life had a way of unraveling just enough to reveal who people truly were. Her father had always told her to listen to the feeling in her chest, the one that rises before your mind has time to explain. Trust yourself, he used to say. It will save you when nothing else can. She finally understood what he meant. Caroline took a slow breath and looked out across the yard, the dew glistening on the grass like tiny beads of light. She was not the same woman she had been a year ago. She was steadier, softer in some places, stronger in others, and for the first time in a long time, she liked the person she was becoming. To anyone listening, she would say this: when something feels wrong, pay attention. Your instincts are not noise. They are warnings carved from experience and intuition. And if life ever pushes you to rebuild, do it piece by piece, even if your hands shake. If this story touched you, tap the like button so I know you are here with me. Share it with someone who might need the reminder that their voice matters. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to know. Thank you for spending this time with me.